Hello, how are you? Thank you for taking out the time. This video is on the Nakshatra of Bharani. This section of the sky falls entirely in the sign of Aries, and as per mythology, it's ruled by Lord Yama. So all the mythology linked to Lord Yama is going to determine what this section of the sky is all about. So I'm going to dedicate the first section of this video to Lord Yama, and in the second section I'm going to explain how different planets behave in Bharani. Lord Yama's primary duty is to receive us at the time of death. This illustration conveys a state of transformation. We have left behind our physical body and we are now going through a change. And that transformation, that change would also be seen in the Bharani native's life. Whilst you are living, you would go through life-changing circumstances. If, for example, you have moon in Bharani in the 8th house, it's very likely you go through life-altering circumstances. Now, where is Lord Yama taking us? He is taking us to the realm of ancestors to decide our future. This is the main duty of Lord Yama. He's going to hold us accountable for every good and bad karma and decide our future on that. We feel that we can continue to tell lies and be part of deceptions. No one's watching us. Lord Yama is. Therefore, as per Indian mythology, Lord Yama is feared. He's also known as the Lord of Death. And in this cosmic courtroom, Lord Yama is helped by Chitragupta, who is a karmic accountant. Lord Yama carries a book on us, on everything we have done, and our future is decided on that. This illustration conveys what the Nakshatra of Bharani is all about. Judiciary, law, justice. The Bharani native might be in a position in the society to decide the future of people. Like a loan officer, you apply for a loan for a car. You explain your circumstances. Now it's up to the loan officer. So people find themselves in a position in the society where they decide the future of other people. Lord Yama is going to decide whether we are going to ascend in the cosmic hierarchy or we are going to descend into the hells. This illustration is explaining in grotesque detail what takes place in the hells, and it essentially symbolizes how important it is for us to be on the right side of karma. There are a few kind souls who elevate and escape this karmic courtroom of Lord Yama. So not everyone has to go through Lord Yama's court of law. There are few who escape. But these hells, very importantly, are under the supervision of Lord Yama. So the Bharani native would experience circumstances in life where the person is witnessing brutality. Like a murder investigator, you see all kinds of crimes, all kinds of murders. So you somehow become immune to violent crimes, brutality and cruelty. In certain cases, a person can also start drawing pleasure from cruelty and brutality due to this. As Lord Yama witnesses, supervises these hells. In his discharge of duty, Lord Yama is helped by Yamadutas. This is symbolic of Lord Yama's leadership qualities, and the Bharani native would have that quality of following. He's going to lead by example. Lord Yama's palace is known to have walls made of gold. This is symbolic that the native might be well off, apart from the native's leadership qualities. In another mythological story, Lord Yama is known to be the first person to have found the path to immortality. Now this may translate to, in this creation, as the native being the first at doing things, like the first person to have climbed a difficult mountain, or the person being an innovator. The native would also love to be in nature. The person would be an explorer, and the person's way of doing things would be out of ordinary, and therefore this nakshatra belongs to the caste of an outcast. A female reproductive organ is one of the symbols strongly linked to the nakshatra of Bharani. That signifies the creation process, which is also linked to death. It's a state of transformation. You've given up one life and you're starting a new life. And for that reason, in my view, the planetary ruler of this section of the sky is Venus, which symbolizes the creation process. All careers linked to the media industry, to graphic design, to fashion design, are directly linked to Bharani. And the person's way of thinking is going to be extremely innovative. The ideas are going to be highly original. Now, what kind of places would you associate with the nakshatra of Bharani? Places which are highly exotic, far away from civilization, for example, as Lord Yama has this desire for exploration. It's also linked to places of justice, all courtrooms. So if you have the ruler of the fourth house, for example, in Bharani, it's likely you can be either living in a place far away from civilization or a place next to a courtroom. Nightclubs are also directly linked to the nakshatra of Bharani. See, Bharani's planetary ruler is Venus. A female reproductive organ is one of its symbol. So glamour. And lastly, all clinics and hospitals which has to do with birth of a child are directly linked to Bharani. One last story linked to Lord Yama is to do with his sister. As per mythology, his sister, who is also an immortal, reached out to him with the desire to have a child together, as immortals are not bound by the norms meant for mortals, to which Lord Yama responded with refusal. This is symbolic of Lord Yama's sense of morality. Even though this nakshatra has a lot to do with sexuality, as a female reproductive organ is one of its symbol, Venus is ruling this section of the sky, but the native, in my view, has the capability to use the right judgment, going after one's materialistic desires. This nakshatra has the nature of Ugra, which translates to fierce. And that can be linked to the scenery of those different hells. You cannot supervise such hells without having a fierce character. Therefore, a Bharani native will always be prone to extremism. This nakshatra has the guna of Rajasic. The person would be worldly, going after things of the world. I think Venus's rulership of Bharani explains that. And lastly, this nakshatra has the temperament, the gana, belonging to a human being. So therefore, if something bothers the native, the person would react. When circumstances are difficult, the person would become vindictive due to its fierce nature, would act like a human being, unlike a divine force which can be more forgiving. I'm also sharing on the screen now a list of careers which you'd be able to relate to with Bharani. The description I have shared of Bharani and the following professions hopefully makes sense to you. So if you find the ruler of the 6th, 10th or the 11th house in Bharani, you could be in any one of these careers. Now before you draw a meaning of a planet nakshatra combination, you must also take in view the houses the planet is ruling, the house the planet is placed in, the placement of the nakshatra ruler, which is Venus, the placement of the sign ruler, which is Mars. You must also study the planet's positions in divisional charts to arrive at the correct interpretation of the planet's position in Bharani. Now, moon in Bharani. Moon is our way of thinking, our mind, and the mind is very impressionable. Therefore, everything I've said about Bharani would be in your way of thinking. You might be a person who judges people based on right or wrong. Oh, that person has done this wrong and therefore this person should be given this punishment. That's Bharani's way of thinking. The person may also have a love for exploration and wanting to be the first at doing things. The sense of thrill the person would achieve in life would be through achieving things for the first time. That might be the main motivating factor. The person may also be very pleasure-seeking. Female reproductive organ, Venus ruling this section of the sky, therefore the person would have that way of thinking. I want to experience that. I want, driven by senses, driven by desires, moon in Bharani. It depends on where Venus is placed. It's going to be very important. The person's way of thinking would be uncommon. People would say you have innovative ideas, yes, but you are by yourself. As this section of the sky belongs to the caste of an outcast, so the person may have only himself or herself to go along with the ideas the person has thought about. Moon has a very nurturing side to it, and therefore the person may become someone who is protecting the ones who are going through injustice. So you would feel for the ones who are suffering. Moon in Bharani. Now when Sun is in Bharani, the person becomes a leader of an unconventional group. Sun is about leadership and Bharani is all about doing things in a way never done before. So the person can be in charge of a group doing things which no one has done. And here the person can become an authority who's deciding people's future. Bharani is a fate deciding section of the sky. So here the person is in charge, like the person involved in the highest court of the country. So now decision has been passed by the lower courts and now it's to the top, the person, the judge at the highest court to make a decision what should be done. So Sun Bharani would have to take ownership for the decisions you'd make in the lives of others. You'd be held responsible fully for the decisions you take. You'll have the authority to bring about life-altering changes in other people's life. Sun in Bharani. A sense of pride might also be there in the person's way of doing things, particularly to do with one's creativity. Sun symbolizes that side of our life, and Bharani is a highly creative section of the sky. And here, fierceness would largely be driven by egotistical side. Someone's hurt your ego and then you become very vindictive. Or I have to get back and set things right. This is wrong. So if political leaders have Sun in Bharani, they can have that character. And Sun belongs to the caste of a Kshatriya, which is a caste belonging to a warrior. So Sun Bharani is a strong force, so it has to be carefully analyzed where Sun is placed, where is Venus placed, which is ruling Bharani, where is Mars placed, as Mars is the sign ruler. So a complete study has to be done, but that's my broad opinion on Sun's position in Bharani. Saturn in Bharani is an interesting one, as Saturn is debilitated here. Now Saturn imposes constraints and it imposes delays. Something you want to get done gets delayed, and if you want to achieve something, your resources get limited. So if you look at the exploration side of Bharani, which is about doing things never done before, if there are delays and constraints and there's limitations, naturally Saturn would feel uncomfortable here. Or should I say, the purpose of Bharani wouldn't be fulfilled by Saturn. And that is, in my view, the main reason behind Saturn's debilitation in this section of the sky. Venus is ruling Bharani, which is also about unhinged creativity, if we combine it with exploration and wanting to be the first. And Saturn is the opposite of that. It's about delaying things. It's about limiting things. It imposes restrictions and constraints. So how can you do things never done before within that? Well, people who do this, but people who end up doing things with Saturn in Bharani, they do things with minimum of resources. Like you hear of someone who has taken simple objects and has created something very artistic. The person didn't have the money, resources. With very limited resources and raw materials readily available, the person has created something beautiful. Saturn in Bharani. When it comes to fate deciding, Saturn Bharani does a really good job. In a courtroom, they are always the ones who are serving the courtroom. Like the one who's recording everything, there's a one person who's managing things. That this is your turn, this is the case. So the ones who are service providers in a courtroom, they are Saturn Bharani like. So I don't think Saturn is actually deciding the fate, but is actually serving the process of fate deciding. A Saturn Bharani like person would have one's desires controlled. And in terms of creativity, the person is going to be an excellent editor. Any creation process that requires time and patience, Saturn is going to be really good at. I think if we combine Saturn's character with its Ugra nature, the person would become very relentless. If the person is vindictive, cruel, the person would be extremely methodical behind one's cruelty. I think worldly desires are going to be limited, which is a good sign. And here, if Saturn is following an outcast kind of a life, it's difficult to imagine Saturn doing something out of convention, as Saturn follows conventions and it symbolizes traditions essentially, and therefore again it's a mismatch. And that's another reason why I believe Saturn is debilitated here, as the outcast nature of Bharani is not fully expressed through Saturn. Jupiter in Bharani does a great job. The main duty of Lord Yama is to decide the fate of other people, and that can only be done if you have a good understanding of law. And Jupiter symbolizes knowledge. So Jupiter Bharani like person can end up being in law, can end up being a judge in particular. The person would have the desire to learn and explore and learn things never learnt before, or go to places would never explored before. Jupiter symbolizes this love for travel, love for knowledge. Jupiter Bharani is a very promising combination if you want to follow that path. You want to go to a foreign country, learn something new. You would find yourself in a position deciding for people one way or the other. So you use your knowledge to make a decision in their lives. You change their future. The person can also become an art director. The direction side comes from Jupiter, and we have already seen Venus is an extremely creative section of the sky. The fierce side of Bharani, I think, is more controlled when Jupiter is in Bharani. And if there is a fight, Jupiter would express its fierceness on principle. That on principle I find this wrong and you've done that wrong. Now you have to pay these consequences, like a judge. Like a judge. As far as materialistic desires are concerned, I think Jupiter may expand those desires. So the person may want to achieve things in the world. The person may want to be known as the one who's the first to have gone there, the first person to have mastered this science, that science. That is the kind of character a Jupiter Bharani-like person is going to have. Venus Bharani firstly symbolizes the person being extremely creative, highly original. The ideas, the creations are going to be highly original. The love for exploration, the love to being the first. The person will get a sense of thrill, a sense of pleasure by doing things for the first time. The person can become attracted to cruelty, might start drawing pleasure from that. Venus Bharani. The person can become excessively pleasure-seeking, and since Bharani is a lot to do with deciding fate, the person can become an expert in resolving issues between couples or business partners, or in money-related issues. Can become a relationship advisor. If there's a dispute on money, the person can become a financial advisor, that you can do this, you can do that. Venus in Bharani. So when Mars is there now, it's a very difficult position, Mars in Bharani, as the person can go to the extreme to make sure that the other person pays for what the person has done wrong. So this is a very extreme combination, Mars and Bharani. Mars is a malefic, Bharani is Ugra, it's a fierce nakshatra. The person would also be very determined to be the first and very determined to explore places undiscovered or invent things never done before, build things never built before. Those are all qualities of Mars. A Mars Bharani-like person can be very pleasure-seeking, and the person may become very sexually driven. Mars and Bharani, both of them symbolizes sexuality. Mars's creative ideas are going to be very practical. That a tiny house, invention, a Mars Bharani-like person can be behind that. Since Mars is technically very sound and excellent at using surgical tools, the person may have a future in gynecology. The ability to control desire would be tested in this combination. The person would feel, I have no control over my desire, and that is the challenge the person will have to overcome. When Mercury is there in Bharani, the first thing that comes to my mind is a barrister who's making an argument to make sure the person pays for what the person has done wrong. Secondly, the person would have highly creative, innovative ideas. The person would be an explorer, but more on a mental plane. The person would be very curious to learn about things never learnt before. So the person may be willing to read books, learn about different sciences which are uncommon, not in the person's normal way of life. Therefore, Mercury Bharani individuals are innovators. And here, if a person has to express one's Ugra side, it would be through one's opinions. The person can have an argumentative side, Mercury in Bharani. The person can be very business-minded, wanting to achieve things of the world. And on an intellectual plane, the person may find oneself as an outcast. So Rahu Bharani person would have uncontrollable desire, and it would be a challenge for the native to control that. The person would have a love for exploration and travel. The person would want to be the first at everything one does. And here the person, whilst practicing justice, might start following law which is different from the law commonly practiced. The person may feel, okay, I don't care about the law, but I feel this is wrong, and therefore I think this person should be given this punishment. So the person starts building one's philosophy of justice based on one's own understanding of law. That is a worrying combination. The person can go to the extreme to hold people accountable for their actions, as Rahu is an extreme force and this nakshatra is Ugra. The person can be extremely pleasure-seeking, highly sexual, and very materialistic, and those are challenges the native would have to overcome in life, and the person would find oneself going by oneself in life, being regarded as an outcast. Now, when Ketu is there in Bharani, the person is very likely to be an explorer, doing things solo, being an outcast. When it comes to justice, the native would go to the extreme. This person has done this thing wrong and therefore should be sent to solitude for many years. So Ketu Bharani is a difficult position. The person would naturally be very creative, Ketu Bharani. Our skills due to past life karma, in my view, are linked to Ketu. When Ketu is in Bharani, the person is naturally very creative. The person would have a control over desire. That's one of the positives coming out of this combination, Ketu in Bharani. And the person might have the power to take things away from other people, which the person may end up misusing. This is a planetary combination which is worrying, but there are some positives arising out of it as well. Now, I'd like to share a few examples. A not so nice example is Adolf Hitler, who has Mars and Venus in Bharani. Now, this is a special case, as Mars and Venus are within 1 degree of one another, and therefore there's a planetary war, and we are seeing the extreme, fierce side of Bharani in his life. This is uncommon to see Mars and Venus in such close proximity in a Ugra Nakshatra. But I'm sure you are able to relate to his activities and what Bharani is all about, particularly Mars in Bharani. I had shared repeatedly that this section of the sky has a lot to do with creativity. And under Jupiter in Bharani's description, I had used the term art direction. That is seen in the life of Andy Warhol, who sort of invented pop art. I was very fascinated by pop art. He has Jupiter in Bharani. It's directly linked to his career. And whilst I was explaining Rahu's position in Bharani, I had mentioned the person may have an own way of seeing things. This is right, this is wrong. What is conventionally followed is fine, but the person may have an own idea of right and wrong. And that is seen in the life of Karl Marx. He has Rahu in Bharani. He also has Moon and Sun in Bharani. People followed Karl Marx, which goes along with the character of Lord Yama. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, please post a comment. And if you'd like to stay in touch, please subscribe to this channel. Thanks again. Bye for now.